What's up, everyone? Hey, listen, I just want to thank every single one of you for watching my very first live podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've come out with some other videos, but quite honestly, there was a lot of editing involved, and I've been asked by a couple of people if I was ever going to do like a podcast of some type or anything like that. And so for me, I just simply decided, hey, I'm just going to go live. I'm going to let this happen and literally be able to share my heart on different things without all the editing, because I just want to be more consistent. For sure, if you enjoy this, if you have topics that you want to talk about, or if this blesses somebody that you know, I definitely want you to share. I want you to subscribe to this. It's going to be something that I'm going to be doing a lot. And so for me, I just wanted to simply come on during the first one and just kind of share who I am and my life and just different things like that, just to kind of show you where I've come from and what God has been able to do with my life. As many of you know, my wife and I actually run a nonprofit called The Forgotten People. And we actually also run a business that is called Zion Multimedia. And it's just unbelievable what God is doing through the both of those. But for me in my life, I grew up in Dallas. And I had a pretty normal childhood. I lived with my mom. Whenever I started growing up, I started realizing, my mom was constantly taking me to DNA testing centers. And I couldn't figure out what that was about. I remember just always having to go and get my mouth swabbed or different things like that. And so finally, whenever I got older, I started asking her, what is this? Why am I doing this? Like, what's the whole purpose of this? And I remember she set me down and talked to me. We were actually driving, and she let me know that, she struggled with drugs when she was younger. And to come up with money for drugs, she would sleep with different people. And with that, she'd get money. I wouldn't necessarily call her a prostitute, but she was very open about her sleeping with multiple different people for the benefit of money. And so in the course of that, my father was actually, to figure out who my father was, it was between 13 different guys. And so my whole childhood, I remember going to DNA testing centers. Well, there's this one guy named Matthew that played guitar in downtown Dallas a lot, and my mom still hung out with, and he was actually one of these men, and he was actually the man that I looked like the most. And I remember that my mom would just constantly tell me, like, that's your father, that's your dad. And so I kind of grew up understanding that, okay, my dad was this guy named Matthew. And so I remember awesome times where we would go to, he was always playing in different bars. And so for me as a little kid, I was growing up in the bar scene and going to bars with my mom and Matthew, and I would play drums. I remember looking forward to playing drums with him, at his shows. And so I would do that. And when I was 8 years old, I remember my mom and him got in a really big fight. I remember him leaving, and when he left, I remember my mom got a call probably about a week later saying that his friend actually found him dead from a drug overdose. And so by the time I was 8 years old, this man that I knew of as my father was the man that basically I kind of grew up understanding, like, this was my dad. And he ended up dying when I was 8. I remember living with my mom, and my mom obviously did everything that she could to be the best mom possible. And I remember her always doing everything that she could to seriously be the best mother possible. I remember she would literally go and take me to like Hurricane Harbor, which was in Dallas, and just did really fun stuff. Like, I remember getting along with my mom so well. Like, we would laugh all the time. My mom was a funny person. Like, a lot of people ask me, like about my personality, because if you really know me, you know me that I'm always trying to be funny and different things like that. And that really comes from my mom, because my mom and I would literally sit there and joke all day. Well, when I was 13 years old, I would notice that she would like be in the bathroom for a long period of time. And I remember just as a 13-year-old being so curious as of what was going on. I never knew my mom as someone who did drugs, ever. Like I never saw her do any of that, not even like smoking weed or anything. I never really seen that until I was 13 years old. I remember seeing just that she would be in her bathroom for hours and hours at a time. And, for me, I got curious, and I ended up just, I kind of picked the lock, or somehow I got into her bathroom. I went into her bathroom, and literally she was sitting on the toilet with a needle in her arm. And I remember just clicking, like, she's doing drugs. Like, this is something that she's like, I couldn't believe it. It was just so traumatizing and shocking to me, especially at that age, at 13. And so from then on, created this very traumatizing experience where she locked me in my bedroom and basically wouldn't let me come out. And she was scared to death that I was gonna call someone and let them know that I'd caught her like doing drugs and just different things like that. And so I remember just different things to where I just started noticing that she was hallucinating even more. She would put towels over the vents of our house. She would put towels over the TVs. And I remember even one time my mom cut hair, so she had this big mirror that was in the back of her closet. And I remember she put her hand to this bag that was close to the mirror, and she saw her own reflection of her hand and started like going crazy, thinking that someone was in the closet. And I remember like just being in the car with her when she was pretty much just driving away from the home, scared because of someone being in our closet. I just remember situations like this. And so finally I ended up running away at one point during that week and going to a friend's house, and she had called the cops saying that I'd ran away. So I come back, and the cops tell me if I didn't come back that they were going to arrest me for running away. And so I remember coming back, and I had this conversation with my mom where I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, like, you've got to stop doing drugs. Like, I love you, and I can't believe this is happening. And I remember begging her, like, will you please stop doing drugs? And I remember her looking directly at me and saying, like, I can't stop. I'm in too much pain. And, my mom grew up, she had a cleft palate when she was born, and so she had a lot of surgeries, and she was in a lot of pain. I mean, I remember it was almost a weekly thing where we were going from one hospital to the next. I remember doctors at hospitals would even shut her down and say, you can't come here, we're not going to give you any more medicine, because she was so addicted to painkillers. And so I remember looking at my mom in that moment and telling her, like, I want you to stop, please stop, I love you so much. And I remember her telling me that, like, I can't stop. And I remember just in anger, as a 13-year-old child, I looked at my mom. As a teen, I looked at my mom and said, I effing hate you. I remember going back into my room, and around 9, or actually before that, I was, it was probably around 3 in the morning. I remember my door gets busted open, and cops have like guns pointed and flashlights everywhere, and there's probably about 4 cops. And I remember them telling me to stand up in my bed, so I was standing there in my boxers, and I kept asking what was going on. A woman cop pulled me to the side and started asking me about my mom, and so I started telling her, like, yeah, I just caught her doing drugs and whatever. And the cop let me know that my mom actually called the police, saying that someone was in my room murdering me, right, because she was having hallucinations. And so I remember looking at the cop and telling her, like, you've got to help me. Like, my mom is losing her mind. She's on drugs, like, whatever. And so I remember the cops said that they were going to follow up, of course, whatever. And so that next morning around 9, I just went back to sleep, or I was back to sleep, and I woke up around 9 in the morning, looking down the hallway. My door was busted open, so I could see down the hallway, and I remember seeing her laying down on her bed. And so for me, I was kind of relieved because I was like, man, she's asleep, like this is good. And so I remember going back to sleep, and around 11 o'clock, I woke up again, looked down the hall, and I saw her in the same position. I knew that something was different. I remember walking down the hallway kind of slowly, just knowing that something was wrong. And literally, I came to this place where I got closer to her, and I just saw that she was pale. I remember getting on the bed, and I remember like screaming like, "Mom, wake up, Mom, wake up." I remember just feeling her body was just a little bit cooler than normal, and she was a little bit stiff. And so I just remember knowing like, my gosh, like I think she's dead. And I remember running out of the house because I was so scared. And I went down to the apartment manager's office just because I didn't know what to do. And I told her, I can't wake up my mom, can you help me? And we ended up walking back to the apartment. By that time we walked back, the fire department was there already, and they were basically like checking her out. One firefighter walked out of our house saying, yeah, your mom's dead. We need you to get somebody. We need you to call somebody. So we ended up calling. And long story short, this horrible, traumatizing experience confused me just because I had pretty much grown up without a father. My mom is now dead by the time I'm 13 years old. I didn't really know what I was gonna do. My grandmother was way too old to take care of me, not able to take care of me. And I just remember being confused in life. And from that point on, I was a bouncer at strip clubs. I made a lot of money as an 18-year-old. I mean, growing up all the way till 18, I started making a lot of money, and I was partying. I was doing everything that I knew to do to fulfill this empty hole that I had inside of me. And it wasn't until I went to this strip club that I was working at as a bouncer. And I remember sitting behind this building and literally sitting behind this building, and I told God, I said, I know of you. I've been around church pretty much all my life. But you've got to show me who you really are, because if you don't show me who you really are, I don't know what to do anymore. I remember having all the money I could ever want. I remember having all the drugs I could possibly ever want, having a girlfriend, doing all this stuff that I thought would fulfill me, but it never did. And that's whenever I opened the Bible that I had in my glove box that my youth pastor gave me at the time. I opened it in the middle, and I opened it to Ecclesiastes 1, and that's where King Solomon, it literally says that King Solomon was the wisest, richest man. And I remember just reading where verse 7, it changed my life, where it says, all streams run into a sea, but the sea is not yet full. And I took that directly as that being me in my heart, how I was pouring drugs and alcohol and all this stuff into my system, but it wasn't ever really satisfying who I was. And so I just kind of got to this point where I said, God, like, here's my life, like, take it. And I remember selling almost everything that I owned. I moved to Houston with one of my best friends, and we went to this internship at a church in Houston. And I just remember my life being radically changed. And it's crazy that, now that I look back at my story, I mean, I even remember a time when I was a child and probably around 10 years old, and I remember going to my house and asking my mom for food. And I remember my mom simply telling me, like, we're not going to be able to eat today because I'm not going to be able to do another haircut. She would cut hair, so she said she's not going to be able to get more money until tomorrow. And so I remember my mom would sit on her bed and make keychains out of beads and like these little leather strings. And I would take these keychains down to 7-Eleven down the street, and I would sell these keychains and pretty much beg people to buy them. And I remember I'd get a hot dog from my mom and I and a Slurpee and bring it back. And I just remember times like that where, man, like I was told for real, like, hey, you're not gonna be able to eat. I remember losing my parents, and I look back at everything that's happened in my life, and now to see how God has brought that full circle. Now I have an opportunity to go to Guatemala and to feed children who are told the very same thing, that they're not going to be able to eat, right? So how awesome is it that me living a life where I was told that same thing at one point in my life, now I'm able to bring that full circle back and say, man, I know what those kids in Guatemala go through. And I want to do everything that I can to help them and provide for them, because man, I love the fact that I had people in my life that helped me through the craziest seasons, and now, we run a business, and I never would have thought, man, I didn't even graduate high school, right? I dropped out of high school, never graduated, don't even have a diploma, never stepped a foot into college, and now that I'm running a social media business is crazy to me. But I see God's hand all over me throughout my entire life, and that's what I think about people that may be watching this. That I look at their life and I say, man, like, yes, you have gone through hell and back. Yes, you have gone through a lot of crap in your life, but the reality is that God is good through it all, even though we may not understand it, right? That's what's crazy is we go through so much crap every single day, every single year. We're going through stuff that we just don't understand. And for me, I just say, man, God, like if I end up under a bridge with my wife and baby one day, I am still going to say, God, you are good, and I trust you, and I know that you're going to bring this full circle, and I know that this is happening for a reason that I may not understand, right? Proverbs 3:5 says, do not lean on your own understanding. And that's me all day. Like I say, God, I'm not even going to try to attempt to understand what's going on. I just fully trust you. And so I want this to encourage someone that, man, you've lived this life where you've been confused. You've gone through a lot of heartache. You've gone through a lot of pain, and you don't understand it. You don't get it. In fact, you blame God for it, right? I want you to be encouraged. And instead of using your past pain like I did for a while, use it as a crutch and just blame things on it all the time and just say, man, like, whatever, like I've gone through hell, like forget this, right? I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to be the lower, whatever it is, right? I want you to be encouraged to do more with your life. Like I remember growing up with my mom living check to check. I remember growing up thinking that, I'm going to go work for whatever. I'm going to work for someone, or I'm going to work for Taco Bell, and I'm just going to kind of make the bare minimum money, right? Because that's what I grew up thinking. And I would have never thought in a million years that God would. Now I'm running a nonprofit that's feeding hungry children in Guatemala, right? Like I never would have thought that would have ever happened. I never would have thought that I was going to run a business. Like what? Like that's crazy. I don't even know what I'm doing half the time, but God is so gracious. And so now I see that all the pain that I experienced is now my fuel, is now my stepping stone to do great things with my life now. Like I married a beautiful, amazing wife. I have an amazing baby. We have a Guatemalan that lives with us, and we're able to care for. We're able to give him somewhat of a normal life. Like we have a business, like all these things I'm just so thankful for. And I'm so thankful that I did go through a crazy point in my life where it has given me this fuel to do even more with my life. And so I want you to look at your life and say, like, man, what have I gone through? And instead of using that as a crutch, instead of using that as something that brings you lower in life, I want you to look at that and say, God, how do I use this for your glory? What do I do with this, right? And that's where I really believe when God says that he gives you the desires of your heart. For me, I love feeding hungry children. For me, I love caring for people. And I believe that that's a desire that God gave me. And so I want to encourage you with your life, like to go out and just do amazing things. Go out and change the world one person at a time. That's really what I've learned. That's for me. That's been the biggest thing that I've done with my life is I've said, God, I don't want my life to be meaningless. I want to actually go and make a change in the world with this. And so listen, I want to encourage you. I love you. We are praying for you. If this blessed you in any single way, I want you to share this with your friends and family. I want you to subscribe to this. I want you just to be part of what we're doing here. I pray that I keep putting out videos that encourage you and talk about topics that are all over the place, but to benefit you and you watching. So I love every single one of you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that my story blesses you and encourages you in some way, shape, or form. I'm always praying for you, and I'll see you soon. Bye.